Meantime, with 60 days to go until the election must take place, let's put our fingers on the pulse of the polls. Now, this is where I'm going to try to do, as simply as possible, explain where things are. Now, let me look at 3 headlines from 3 different organisations, 3 different polls, all of them telling some sort of the same story. The Guardian and the Essential poll says that Albanese scores his highest approval rating in 18 months, support for Dutton slips. The Financial Review has the Freshwater poll, says Dutton coming off the boil as election nears. And News poll in the Australian newspaper says majority of voters believe coalition not ready to govern yet. So this is over before it begins, right? The only option is majority for Labor, a miracle majority, or still holding on to power but in minority, but not so bad a minority that may or may not need the Greens, but even if they need the Greens, they'll still be in power. Well, that's not what people who put their money where their mouth is think about the upcoming election in just 60 days from now. The bookies and all 3 of the majors tell us that it'll be the coalition that is most likely to form government. Now, it's getting tighter, sure. $1.50 to $2.62, $1.70 to $2.10, or $1.60 to $2.25, but still, all 3 right now are showing, after a preponderance of polls, after multiple attempts to change the subject, and after definitely not campaigning during a cyclone, they still think that this government is going to be dislodged in just 60 days' time. Again, I keep showing you this headline because the spin that was coming out of the Turnbull Times today was, again, all the focus was that Anthony Albanese's numbers were getting better. And yes, according to this poll, there is marginal improvement about approval versus disapproval. However, they have buried the lead. Because the primary vote of the Labor Party, even in this poll that was spun this way by this news organisation today, shows that the Labor Party's vote is down 4% nationally. Now, the Liberal Party is down 1% as well. That is not good in terms of their capacity to challenge. But remember, if the lowest primary vote since the 1900s, I think it was, and we haven't been holding many elections before the 1900s, but you get my point. One of the lowest Labor primary votes ever, of 33% of the last election, they are 4 points below that now. Overall, Labor 29, the LNP 35, both down. The Greens holding at 12%. One Nation is up 3%. Others in independents, and remember that can be everything from Victorian socialists to Teals and genuine community independents like Bob Catter. Well, they're down 6% because they have an undecided number inside their poll, and that shows 6%. If that 6%, let's imagine, goes 50-50, well, it puts a scenario where the Libs, they move up to 39 and Labor goes back to 32. If the Liberal Party was at 39%, they would be very close to winning an election. But perhaps the detail that no one is talking about when it comes to the polls, because they are focused on the horse race of Team Red and Team Blue, or focusing on the Teals as a way of dislodging Team Red, or focusing on the Greens because they are a way of dislodging Team Red, the Teals for Team Blue. Got a lot in my head at once here. Let's talk about One Nation. Because One Nation is polling very, very well. Nobody's talking about it because they don't want to talk to One Nation people. You know, we talk to Pauline. You know, we support many and much of the things that she stands for in and out of the parliament. In terms of her, she's not on the ballot. It'll be Malcolm Roberts with the best chance of winning a Senate seat in Queensland. But have a look. In 2022, they got 5%. News poll today says their vote is up to 7%. The Essential poll, 8%, and the Resolve poll, 9%. So anywhere between 2 and 4 points has been the increase in the One Nation vote since the 2022 election. That is massive. Not just because it may well affect certain Senate races, most likely in places like Western Australia, Tasmania, maybe New South Wales, but definitely it makes things better in Queensland. But just imagine if preference, discipline, was shown by people who vote for the Trumpets or people who vote for One Nation, as they did in 2019, when the majority of people who voted for One Nation preferenced away from the Labor Party. They preferenced towards the Liberal Party. That's why Bill Shorten never became Prime Minister. Something that has been grossly undercalculated in many of these polls, underdiscussed in the wall-to-wall coverage of polls and politics, is something's going on in Australia right now with One Nation. Now, there have been plenty of polls ahead of previous elections that have shown that their numbers were slightly going up, but maybe the vote doesn't turn up. But if we can bring back again that vision of where we were in 22 versus where we are now when it comes to one nation, pretty healthy. 2 points you could say is margin of error. Once you start to get to 3 and 4, then there has been a serious move. Where do these people come from? Do they come from the Liberal Party? Do they come back from the other or the independent? Are they part of the United Australia Party, of which I think only 1% is currently sticking around under the new banner? Wait and watch this space, because 9% of preferences, where the first vote might go to one nation, but the second vote might go to the Liberal Party, will tip seats. And it won't matter what the two-party preferred is going into election day. The result in the seats that matter, and sometimes one nation can surprise in its votes, particularly in places like Western Sydney and out of Melbourne and northern Tasmania. A lot more people need to keep an eye on one nation, and I would suggest actually start talking to them. Not trying to interrupt them, not trying to talk over them, not trying to embarrass them, not trying to come up with some scandal like they have in previous elections. Normally they like to do this the day after all of the candidates are locked in. But people seem to like some of the ideas which have been put on the table by One Nation, including policy ideas. Chief amongst them, that if only one person in your house is working, rather than that person getting taxed at the full amount that they are earning, you divide it by 2 if they have a spouse. That brings down their taxes. One of many good ideas, on top of issues like immigration, which I know they will say is racist to talk about, but the reality is 1 million more people being added to the nearly 30 million who live here now means every queue got longer, every service harder to access, more ambulance ramping, harder to get your kids into the school that you want to, and over and over and over again, let alone renting or let alone trying to bid at an auction. The second thing, as I take a look at the polls and look at the polls here, where the money says the Libs are going to win, the polls say things are starting to move back Labor's way. The detail of the polls says that if One Nation preferences go the Liberals' way, then this thing may well end up being yet another surprise victory. The other is in and around the softness of votes. Now, I've shown you this before, but I want to keep reminding people about this because there are people who watch the show who talk about politics for a living. Sometimes they hate when I get it right, but I'm right on this one. Have a look at the Essential poll because it shows that 13% of people, as he puts his glasses on, currently have not decided. 35% of people say they may swing either way, but I want to focus on that red because that is the number of people who have not made a decision yet. Yet still they give answers to pollsters about who they're going to vote for. 9% of them say they're going to vote for Labor, 4% say they're going to vote for the coalition, but 20% of people who have not made a decision, bottom right-hand corner. I used all of the graphics capability of my Commodore 64 to draw that little red rectangle for you. 20% of people who currently are sitting in the other category or independents have not made any decision at all about which way they're going to vote, meaning this thing is up for grabs. The government thinks they're going to be able to buy people off, but as I'll tell you in a moment or two's time, they have not been able to successfully do that when it comes to a budget. The budget in reply speech has produced moments for Peter Dutton where he's dropped policy that 73% of people agree with, like banning foreign buyers for a couple of years so people who are already here get the chance to bid for a property and not get blown away by money from overseas. Watch this space. We count all the grains of sand on the beach, then we tell you how the beach is changing and moving. It is a knife edge right now. The media will try to say the narrative is that the Libs can't win. Well, someone should tell the bookies. If they change their mind, I'll tell you, but I'll try to update you in a whole picture as many times as we can here on this show.